The notion of abstraction can seem counter to what photography is so good at, describing what is before us in amazing detail. The history of photography is filled with images that bring us people, places, times we've never experienced. For instance, the tradition of social documentary calls attention to social issues we might not know of. Landscape photography reminds us of the grandeur of the natural world. Social landscape points out how humans interact with nature. Even class portraits and family photos have a place reminding us of our personal history. Abstraction also has a part in the history of photography. I'd like to share a few examples from photographers throughout the history of the medium and the various ways they've explored abstraction. Many of these photographers are ones whose work I was looking at when I began to make images. Some of the thoughts I will share to accompany the images are from a book by Lyle Rexer called The Edge of Vision, The Rise of Abstraction in Photography. This book is just a couple years old. Rexer begins by proposing a definition of abstraction. He calls them photographs without pictures, or rather photographs that refuse to fully disclose the images that they contain. His alternative to the term abstraction is the phrase undisclosed images. So I'll show you a few. Starting with Anna Atkins, the botanical illustrator who made this image must have been amazed with the clarity with which this new cyanotype process recorded her subject. Today, we respond primarily to the rich color and the intriguing patterns, even if we don't really know what her subject is. Roger Fenton's landscape from 1860 splits the composition into stark tonal planes as the road bisects the scene and meets the sky. Coburn made these images with a camera created with a multifaceted prism. He called them vortographs, and that was related to a painting school of the time when he was working. Edward Steichen made this very abstract pattern-based image for fabric design. He made a series of them. Paul Strand's photographs are of recognizable objects, but the strong contrast of tones and the forms carry the images. Karl Blossfeld's plant studies were made for industrial design classes that he taught, but he photographed quite a series of plants to show his students nature as a perfect inspiration for design. These are a couple of images by Paul Outerbridge. The one on the left is titled Triumph of the Egg. He made these in the 1930s. These are some of the wilder images I've seen. These are made by Henry Holmes Smith. They are indeed cameraless images. He used corn syrup and dripped patterns on a sheet of glass, then tilted the glass up, projected light through it, and made images of the patterns of the corn syrup. And many of them end up taking on shapes we might see in nature, shapes that are evocative of human figures sometimes. Ruth Bernhard made wonderful abstracts for commercial uses, for personal uses. Arnold Newman, the portrait photographer, even though I don't do a lot of portraits, is really one of my favorite photographers. He did taught me a lot about portrait photography, but even more about composition, about minimalism in photographs. Ray Metzger relies on very high contrast to contribute to abstraction in these pieces. Aaron Siskin, many people think of first when considering abstraction in photography. He purposefully flattened the picture plane, moving the image beyond a literal reading of his subject. Harry Callahan was a contemporary and friend of Siskin, known mainly for photographs of his wife Eleanor and his daughter, but also did some very abstract images. Frederick Sommer did this piece of cutout paper, so of course I like that. Ralph Gibson's work really relies on a combination of high contrast and graininess and very strong graphic compositions. So I gave him 2 slides. Barbara Kasten has investigated how light creates and complicates space by photographing models made of mirrors and planes. This is but a small sampling of photographers whose work have employed principles of abstraction, and you're probably thinking of many, many who I did not include, and when I started researching this, I realized there are so many images to show, and not enough time. You may have noticed that the strong tradition of abstraction in landscape photography has been underrepresented in the selections I showed you. Given your incredible local landscape, made yesterday with my iPhone, and the very rich history of photographers, past and present, who have made astonishing images of that landscape, I imagine you're all well-versed in the metaphorical and transformative properties, possibilities of the natural world as subject. Rexer writes, each step in the progress towards an image removes it from its direct representation, solicits the artist with an invitation, a permission to intervene, to generalize and divagate from the imperative of disclosure. This invitation to the photographer to make layer after layer of decisions when creating photographs goes to the heart of what makes photographic interpretation so personal and exciting and abstract. We see what we want to see, what we're able to see, based on our knowledge and history. As Paul Simon says, a man sees what he wants to see and disregards the rest. Or Dwayne Michaels says, photography deals exquisitely with appearances, but nothing is what it appears to be. Rexer's last chapter in his book is titled, "This is not a photograph." To me, this is a question. And here are samples of artists working with the artifacts of our medium: film, chemicals, paper, pixels, to create very abstract work. Are they photographs? Sometimes light is not even part of these. Do they ask us to redefine photography? Are they something completely different? These two, made by Marco Brewer, are just a photographic paper, color paper, and he has abraded the surface and then developed it. No light, but photographic artifacts. Penelope Umbrico took photos of suns from Flickr, which is an online photo sharing site, and combined them together to make a collage, removing them from their context. In these last ones, Nikki Steger places objects between the enlarger and color photographic paper to make these. I haven't answered for myself whether these are photographs. Many of them I find quite beautiful. They've prompted me to think about how our ever-evolving medium, photography, continues to evolve. One more of mine. As I relate to you what I have taken from my reading of both Jonah Lehrer and Lyle Rexer, please keep in mind that just as I see what I want to see or can see in artwork, I read what I can understand and what interests me in these writings based on my history. I hope I have not misinterpreted their ideas, but I know they've served as departure points for my thinking and for my artistic exploration. And for me, that's exciting and that's good. I'll end with one last quote from Rexer that might sum it all up. And thank you so much.